The alarms began as a distant stuttering pulse through the Lunara trauma annex, just at the edge of hearing, before surging into a full-throated wail that set teeth on edge and thumped in skulls and rib cages. Dr. Amrita Das paused with gloved hands, hovering over a sedated patient. The patient's abdomen was open, carefully retracted, while a robotic arm held steady over an improvised vascular shunt. Blood beat softly against plastic. "Mass casualty alert," the overhead speakers announced in a flat, unbothered voice. "Incoming traffic, civilian and military. Estimated arrival, 6 minutes." Amrita's eyes flicked up to the display in the corner of the operating room. Trajectory lines converged on the moon. Shuttles, tugs, one limping corvette. A skirmish, then. There was always a skirmish somewhere these days. Now that Earth and its colonies sat awkwardly at the edge of several older powers' spheres of influence. Her circulating nurse, hands poised above the instrument tray, cleared his throat. "Doctor, we can close in 4 minutes if you... We don't cut corners," Amrita said, reflexively. "Seal the distal clamp. Reinforce the anastomosis. We finish this right, then we go save the next person." Her words were calm, but she felt the same pressure everyone did, pressing at the back of her head. 6 minutes until the doors blew open, with more broken bodies than the annex could comfortably handle. She leaned into the procedure, mind cutting time into precise, controlled moments. A suture passed, a vessel tied, the soft tone from the monitors as the patient's pressure stabilized. By the time she stripped her gloves off and stepped back, the overhead countdown had reached 1 minute. In the corridor beyond the operating room, the air already vibrated with shouted orders and the whine of gurney mag struts. She peeled off her gown, snapped fresh gloves from a dispenser as she walked, and joined the tide. The trauma bay blossomed like a nightmare garden. Screens unfurled from the ceiling, projecting vital stats in floating layers. Emergency pods opened like petals, their interiors slick with biosafe gel. Medical teams fanned out, snapping on masks, their eyes hard and bright. Shuttles began docking. The first wave brought in station workers from a punctured freighter, faces pale, hands clenched around burns and lacerations. The second wave, soldiers in UTA uniforms, some still smoking from plasma burns, a few ominously still under vacuum-sealed shrouds. Amrita moved from table to table, assigning triage levels, tapping at interfaces, letting instinct and training guide her. Then the third shuttle arrived. It was an ugly thing, scarred, scorched, its hull patched with mismatched alloy plates. No identifiable transponder pinged from it. Security teams massed at the bay doors as it settled, weapons raised. Non-compliant vessel, intoned to the docking controller. Unknown registry. Bear in mind Annex Engagement Protocol section. The hatch blew before the sentence finished. Pressure containment fields snapped into place with a thud. A small boarding ramp extended, and a figure stumbled down it, armor in tatters, one arm limp and blackened. Not human. The creature's bulk dwarfed the security team. It had a thick torso wrapped in a patchwork of ceramic plates and alloy bands. 4 powerful arms ending in taloned graspers, and a massive angular head crest that swept back like horns. Bioluminescent lines pulsed faintly under cracked skin. 2 more figures followed, similarly armored, weapons holstered, hands raised, open-palmed in a universal gesture. They spoke in guttural consonants, translation units at their throats, struggling. Emergency, patient, critical, our king is dying. Security swarmed them. A lieutenant snapped orders, rifles tracking the aliens' cores. "Drop your weapons! On your knees! Now!" The 2 escorts complied, moving slowly, carefully exaggerating their motions. The injured one behind them took another staggering step and collapsed onto the deck with a sound like metal drums falling. Amrita, scanning incoming manifests on her wristband, felt her eyes snag on one flashing red entry. Unidentified alien. Status. Critical. Phyology. Unknown. Requested. Trauma surgery. She glanced from the entry to the hulking form bleeding dark fluid onto her clean deck. One of the translators hissed and chimed. Grav bloom collapse. Internal ruptures. He will die. You must. The security lieutenant cut him off. "No one must do anything. You people things fire on our convoys and now you think you can land here?" The alien's second escort bared jagged teeth. "We came under truce flag." "Flag or not," the lieutenant said, "you're pirates." Amrita stepped forward before the argument could solidify into something impossible to move. "Lieutenant, that's an emergency case. We have to get him on a table." "Doctor, with respect, we don't screen by politics," she said. "You know that." The security officer's jaw set. "You do not know who that is, Doctor. I just got the ident from command." She hesitated, while the overhead screens flickered to a new priority alert. The alien's outline appeared, with a hastily matched profile photo and records. Name: Karn Veskal. Species: Dromek. Status: high-threat piracy leader. Warlord. Wanted in connection with multiple massacres of civilian crews from Orishe, Thalrin, and independent vessels. Bounty value spanned several lines. The Bloodwake Armada. That name meant lost convoys. Rumors whispered in docking bars about entire freighters snuffed without a distress signal. Children in the outer colonies sometimes played a cruel game called Here Comes Bloodwake, where one child took all the toys and threw them in a bin while the others pretended to suffocate. "And that," the lieutenant said quietly, "is the one they follow." Amrita looked down at him. He was enormous, even sprawled on the deck, but she could see the vital signs in the translucence of his skin, the way the bioluminescent veins along his flank flickered and dimmed, the tremor in his breath. The translator at his collar flickered to life for a second, catching a hoarse rasp of alien syllables. Almost nothing left. He was dying. "We have dozens of injured humans inbound," the lieutenant said. "You know how crowded we're already going to be. Every cubic meter of this place needs to be saving our own. Trauma beds don't know the difference," Amrita replied. "I took an oath." The lieutenant's eyes were flinty. "You also swore to obey Annex command structure. Command is considering this situation. You will not move him until we have orders. Is that clear?" It was clear. It was also, in Amrita's mind, wrong. She knelt anyway, ignoring the way the escorts watched her like predators. Her gloved hand touched Karn's chest, where plates had been torn aside to reveal an improvised pressure seal over a puncture. When she pressed gently, something crackled beneath. Multiple rib fractures, internal bleeding, and something else she barely recognized. A diffuse tissue degeneration, like accelerated autoimmune collapse, eating away at him from within. Not just wounded, sick. Her wristband pinged softly. A secure message. Priority comm from Earth Orbital. Admiral Marek Wajek. She straightened and turned away from the tableau, stepping to a wall console. The Admiral's face appeared, lined, eyes sunken from too many short nights, his hair clipped regulation short. "Dr. Das," he said, "I assume you see what just fell into your lap." "I do, sir," she answered. "He needs surgery within minutes." He studied her. "You understand who he is?" "Yes. You understand that if he dies here, of his injuries, many people will sleep easier. My analysts assure me the Bloodwake Armada without its king is a scattered nuisance, not an organized threat." "I've also read the profiles, sir. Killing a prisoner by omission doesn't make us safe. It makes us liars." A flicker of something crossed Marek's face. Weariness, mostly. He had commanded too many desperate retreats from bigger, older fleets, who smiled politely while tightening trade nooses. "Doctor, no one is asking you to kill him," Marek said. "We're asking you to let events take their course. You don't have a roadmap for his biology. There is a high risk we waste scarce resources on a futile attempt." There it was, the practical argument. She took a breath. Over his shoulder, she could see the ghostly outlines of orbital ships, the control staff clustered behind him, the windowed curve of Earth. "When I took this position," she said, "you told me we were building something here that would outlast old grudges. That if we wanted respect from older powers, we needed to show we could be better than they were when they crawled into the stars. Is that still the plan?" He exhaled slowly. Her mind, unbidden, jumped to images from her childhood. Old documentary clips of field hospitals where her grandparents worked, crowded with enemy and ally alike. They had always insisted that medicine was the one place where war drew no lines. "I am not blind to the symbolism," Merrick answered, "but I am also not blind to the danger. If he wakes up on your table and takes medical staff hostage, that is on me. If his escort team has a hidden blade in this, that is on me." "Keep security tight," Amrita said. "Restrain him if you have to. I don't care about the optics of that, but let me try. If he dies despite that, then we did what we could. If he lives, because we sat on our hands." She shook her head. "That is a stain we don't wash off." There was silence between them, filled only by muffled cries from the trauma bay. Finally, Merrick nodded once, the motion short and resigned. "You have constrained authorization," he said. "One theater, your team only. The moment he is stable or dead, security takes control. Clear?" "Clear," she said. "Doctor," Merrick added, voice lower, "if at any point you believe he will harm your people, you have my authorization to sedate him indefinitely. Do what you must to keep our staff alive." She met his gaze. "Understood, Admiral." The screen went dark. She turned back to the chaos. "Get him into OR 3, she called, voice cutting across the bay. "I want full isolation, full restraints, and every xenobiology reference we have loaded up front. Nia, I need you." A slim woman with a shock of black hair streaked with copper looked up from a half-disassembled diagnostic console. Nia Suleiman's eyes were already tracking ahead of the order. "Makeshift interface?" Nia guessed. "We don't have half the adapters for that physiology." "Then build them," Amrita said. "You've always liked a challenge." The Dromic escorts tensed as security moved in, weapons held steady. One of them growled warningly when restraints were produced. Amrita stepped in front of their line of sight. "He dies. Your fleet splinters," she said bluntly. "He lives. He leads. Let us do our work, and you can argue about your honor codes later." They looked at each other, and then, with evident reluctance, let the human staff clamp polymer bands around their king's limbs and torso. Within 2 minutes, Karn Veskul lay under surgical lights, his bulk straining the limits of the table. Monitors struggled to map his vital rhythms into any recognizable pattern. His mouth worked around a breathing tube, serrated teeth glinting. Amrita's mind ran ahead, cataloging unknowns: Dromic circulatory system, tissue response, drug sensitivities. There had been papers, case reports, from faraway stations, but nothing in depth. Gravbloom had been mentioned in panic-flavored medical bulletins as an emerging condition among certain outer species. Autoimmune, degenerative, the data was fragmentary. Nia slid a rack of improvised sensors into place, soldering gleaming leads to contact pads as quickly as steady fingers allowed. "We're blind if we don't get phonon echo on this tissue. And legally I have to remind you we are absolutely not cleared to do this kind of on-the-fly hardware modification while in surgery." "Duly noted," Amrita said. "Do it anyway." Captain Rafael Ibarra appeared at the door, still in half of his uniform, jacket open, a streak of someone else's blood drying along his jawline. His ship, ISS Tsiolkovsky, had docked to donate its better surgical suite to the overflow. "You called?" he asked. "I need your cardiac stabilizers," she said without preamble. "Annex stock is already stretched, and this heart is going to be enthusiastic." He stepped closer and looked down at Karn. "How enthusiastic?" Amrita gestured at the main monitor. "Basal cardiac output is somewhere around triple human norm given body mass, and it's decompensating. If we can't smooth the rhythm while we patch the physical damage, we're going to be chasing our tails." Raphael blew out a breath. "My crew's not going to be thrilled about having their toys cannibalized for someone who's hunted their cousins, but we'll live with it." "They will, if you retrieve them afterward," she said. "If you don't, they're useless either way." His smile was brief. "That's the optimism I come here for." He squeezed her shoulder lightly, then vanished back into the corridor to make the necessary requisitions. Time shrank, then stretched. As they opened Karn's chest and abdomen, Amrita's world became blood, bone, torn organ, and strange, almost glassy tissue that crumbled too easily under her instruments. Gravbloom had hollowed him out from the inside, leaving latticework where solid strength should have been. This, she realized, went beyond battlefield trauma. This was a disease burning through a species, underreported and poorly understood, because those afflicted often lived on the wrong side of every official border. "Pressure's dropping again," one of the nurses said. "Clamp here," Amrita replied, fingers probing, finding a rent in a vessel she would not have recognized as an artery without Naya's real-time structure mapping. "Suture? No, that fiber will shear it. Use the micronet." They worked in a dance of orders and responses, hands flying, instruments humming. External sound fell away. Her awareness tunneled until only the green-lit field mattered. At some point, the overhead speakers chimed faintly. "Incoming civilian shuttle. Critical. Incoming military evac. Severe. Incoming military evac. Severe." All staff. The voice dissolved into static as Naya yanked a cable to redirect more power to the surgical suite's improvised monitors. "Sorry," Nia muttered. "Didn't need the distraction." Hours flowed. Twice, Karn's heart fluttered and nearly stopped. Each time, Raphael's stolen stabilizer field snapped into place and coaxed it back into a steady, sledgehammer beat. Somewhere around the 10th knot, Amrita felt the procedure slide past a jagged ridge from hopeless to possible. They had removed dead tissue, patched burst organs, reinforced weakened structures with carefully chosen scaffolds whose biochemistry she'd adjusted on instinct and reference data from distantly related species. He was not out of danger, but he was no longer actively dying under her hands. She closed layer by alien layer and stepped back only when the monitors showed a fragile but consistent pulse. "Time?" she asked hoarsely. 9 hours, 32 minutes, a nurse answered. Amrita rolled her shoulders, feeling the burn. "Keep the restraints on and sedation deep," she said. "I want Gravbloom Labs started yesterday. Nia, Raphael, you're both on my shortlist for sainthood if this works." "Don't tell my grandmother," Raphael said. "She'll start a campaign." They laughed, faintly, in the exhausted way of people who'd held death at arm's length for too long. Outside, the annex was a charnel house turned factory of patchwork miracles. Many had not made it. Many had. Human bodies filled the beds and corridors. The alien escorts paced, growling softly, under heavy guard. On a command deck in Earth orbit, Admiral Marek Wojcik watched the rolling feed from the surgery through a secure line. Around him, staff tracked fleet movements, border disputes, cargo manifests. His attention, though, stayed with the flickering heart of an enemy under human lights. When the status flag finally flipped from critical unstable to critical stable, he exhaled slowly. "Sir?" one of his officers asked. "Nothing," he said. "Just mark the time." Then, quietly, he opened a separate channel, one Karn had described in gruff, offhand words during an earlier interrogation. Back when the Dromic was still a rumor officials denied was in human custody, he typed a message without sending, fingers hovering. "Your king still draws breath. Do you want him back?" He erased it. Instead, he saved a draft of something else in a folder he titled Penance Protocol. Down on the moon, under drifting twilight, Karn Veskel dreamed. He dreamed of fire. He dreamed of his childhood on a Dromic mining outpost, lungs burning from dust, muscles screaming as gravity flexed wrong. He dreamed of the first time Gravbloom took one of his brothers, turning him from a laughing, sharp-eyed youth into something hollowed and brittle in weeks. He dreamed of the wars, of the first time he boarded a Thalran cruiser and saw how other species treated his people, as hired muscle, frontline fodder, and then dead. He dreamed of the moment he decided to stop taking contracts and start taking ships, calling together every bitter, cheated crew he could find and naming them the Bloodwake Armada. He dreamed of battles he'd won by being meaner, hungrier, smarter, and he dreamed of collapsing on cold alien flooring. Sure, his last sight would be the muzzle of a gun. Instead, he saw a pair of dark human eyes above a mask, intent and unafraid. Why? He thought, even as sedatives dragged him down. Why would prey? The question followed him into the dark. Years passed. The calendars on Earth shifted to accommodate an awkward reality. Humanity was no longer just a species on one green world and a few dusty rocks. It was a minor but noticeable participant in a web of trade, diplomacy, and petty hostilities that had been spinning among the stars for a very long time. Kalpana Ring traced its patient orbit above Earth, a shining donut of habitats and labs and docks. Where Lunara Annex had been a hurried retrofit, Kalpana was a planned node. Wide, clean corridors, observation decks, whole wings dedicated to xenomedical research. Dr. Amrita Das walked those corridors now, older, hair pulled back with the functional ruthlessness of someone who had too many patients and not enough hours. Her name was known in circles far beyond human space, spoken with a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. She had done what few others had tried: take an emerging, poorly understood syndrome like Grav Bloom and apply human medical stubbornness to it. The Dromic were not her only patients. The plague, or something like it, trickled through genetically diverse populations along the frontier, eating at connective tissues, destabilizing structural proteins. The first time a quiet, cloaked Dromic freighter had docked at Kalpana, its crew members, half hidden in hoods, clutching at the sides of gurneys bearing afflicted kin, station security had panicked. It had taken personal intervention from Admiral Merrick and a signed guarantee from the United Terran Assembly to allow those patients into her ward. She had treated them one by one. Some she had saved, some she had not. But the survival curve nudged upward, then upward again as techniques improved. Word spread through pirate channels faster than any official report. Karn Veskul, officially held in a classified facility tethered to Aegis Spire, watched those ripples with hooded eyes whenever Merrick came to speak with him. Their relationship was not friendly, but it had moved beyond animosity into wary conversational territory. Merrick brought news of frontier politics and occasionally rough transcripts of scurrilous tales trading at Cinderport about the strange healer on the ring. Karn, in turn, explained Dromic honor customs, piracy protocols, and the fractal maps of grudges that defined his domain. In the years since the surgery, he had never fully recovered. Grav Bloom did not simply vanish. It retreated, lurked, then struck when biology weakened. Amrita's interventions bought time, not cure. But time mattered. His concession, made under lingering sedation in a secure comm cell years ago, had mattered too. "Stand down from human lanes," he had rasped then, his voice like metal grated against stone. "No raids within the white-blue world's watch. That space is held. Anyone breaking this will find themselves outside my airlock." The Bloodwake captains had argued, some loudly, some only in private, but by and large, they had obeyed. The casualty graphs for human convoys from that day forward dipped quietly and stayed low. Officially, no one knew why. Unofficially, Merrick and Hector Gavris watched and took notes. Other powers noticed as well. The Thauran Commonwealth did not like unexplained stability so close to a potential rival. The Arishi Compact, their longtime competitor, distrusted any peace they had not negotiated themselves. They each sent diplomats, politely worded offers of mutual defense agreements, and trade pacts that seemed generous on the surface, but always included clauses for basing rights and dispute arbitration, heavily favoring themselves. Merrick kept them talking, but never signing. He nursed an increasingly fragile balancing act, aware that at some point, patience would run out. On Kalpana Ring, May Ocampo sipped bad vending machine coffee and scrolled through incident reports. May had chosen Martian citizenship early, then spent most of her career everywhere but Mars. She specialized in patterns, not the dramatic obvious ones that politicians like to wave around, but quiet ones that emerged in shipping logs, insurance rates, and gossip taped in low-gravity bars. Over the past few years, the pattern around Earth's shipping lanes had become impossible to ignore. Insurance premiums for routes passing within 5 light-years of Sol had dropped and stayed low even as comparable routes near other frontier hubs spiked. She laid out maps, layered heat signatures, cross-referenced rumored pirate sightings with confirmed convoy paths. Small anomalies appeared. A sudden vanishing of Dromic, raiding groups near sectors where humans had recently begun to expand. Snippets of overheard talk, in spacers' tongues, about a standing order among Bloodwake crews. "Stay clear of the healer's home," one translated fragment read. "The Crown owes them. Break that, and choking on vacuum will be kinder than what follows." The Crown, the Bloodwake flagship's nickname. May tapped her stylus against her teeth. The Dromic King had vanished from recorded space years ago, right when a mysterious emergency on Luna had been scrubbed from public logs. The gap between those events was only suggestive if one was already suspicious, but suspicion was May's natural state. She crafted a pitch to her editor, a feature on how frontier legends sometimes held more truth than official files. The editor, seeing clicks in the making, waved it through. By the time May's shuttle slid into dock at Kalpana, the political situation had tightened another notch. In rapid succession, the Thalran Commonwealth and the Orishe Compact announced a joint initiative to combat escalating pirate threats near human space. In practical terms, that meant forming a combined fleet and asking the UTA to host it in Earth orbit, where it could respond quickly to any aggression. The UTA Council chamber simmered with arguments. Hector Gavras stood at the center, hands wrapped around a tablet full of legal drafts. His voice was even, but a pulse beat visibly at his temple. "They're offering protection from a threat that has mysteriously receded in our immediate neighborhood," he said, using that same threat as justification for a permanent military presence that would, incidentally, ensure both of them will never have to negotiate with us as equals. Some counselors objected that refusing such an offer was reckless. Marek, leaning against the wall in his blue and black uniform, did not trust his voice until someone demanded his opinion outright. "We do not have the fleet to face them head-on," he said. "If we reject this without offering an alternative, they will interpret that as defiance, backed by nothing." "What alternative do we have?" a counselor snapped. "Ask the pirates nicely to guard our borders?" The chamber tittered, humorless. Marek's gaze dropped to the corner of his tablet screen, where a single icon pulsed faintly. The unsent draft of the penance protocol. "Something like that," he said quietly, mostly to himself. Within days, the Thalran Orishi Joint Armada began assembling at a polite distance. Cruisers with latticed wings, carrier hulks, sleek spear-shaped corvettes. Official communiques spoke of drills and coordination. Unofficially, some in Thalran intelligence decided there was one obstacle they could remove ahead of time that would make everything simpler. If the Bloodwake Armada's taboo on human space hinged on its king's personal order, then eliminating him would remove the need for certain diplomatic courtesies. A leak within the UTA, ideological and impatient, provided coordinates under the table. The secure facility, aligned with Aegis Spire, where an unnamed Dromic high-value detainee was held. On a cool morning by Earth orbital clocks, a Thalran Black Ops team translated into stealth range. In the secure wing, Amrita reviewed Karn's latest scans with a frown. "You've been pushing yourself," she said. "I have been sitting in a box," Karn replied, voice raspier than before. "How does one push oneself sitting in a box?" Grav blue markers glowed angrily on her screen. The degenerative pattern had flared again, chewing at newly crucial load-bearing structures. Stress, she thought. The constant pressure of being an asset everyone wanted to leverage. A monster every power wanted to claim or kill. "We're going to adjust your regimen," she said. "I warned you the first rounds bought time, not immunity." He watched her, yellow eyes sharp even in pain. "Time to do what?" he asked. "Decide what you want to do with the part of the galaxy that listens to you," she answered, almost without thinking. He huffed a sound that might have been a laugh. "I am a prisoner, little surgeon. The only ones listening to me are those who come to barter my knowledge for your council's favors." "And the ship's not raiding our lanes," she said. "Don't sell yourself short. You've caused quite a plunge in certain industries that rely on high insurance premiums." He made a rough gesture that her translation unit rendered as disdainful. "The lanes of your home are quiet because I told them they were," he said. "Not out of kindness, out of debt. Dromic, do not forget, saved lives." His gaze slid past her to the small viewport, where Aegis Spire arced like a ring of knives above Earth's haze. "Others do not share that regard," he added. They did not have time to develop that thought. The first explosion rippled through the facility like a beast kicking in its sleep. The lights flickered. The floor lurched. A siren howled, a different pitch from the familiar medical alarms. Hull breach, a synthesized voice barked. Deck 5. Unauthorized boarding detected. All security personnel to stations. Amrita grabbed the edge of Karn's bed as gravity momentarily misaligned. "What is that?" he snarled, already straining against his restraints. "Stay down," she ordered. "If there's an impact, those restraints might be the only thing that—" The wall nearest the corridor bulged, then burst inward in a haze of scorched composite. Figures in matte black armor surged through, weapons glowing. Thalrin design. She recognized the segmented shoulder plates from too many news feeds. For half a heartbeat, everyone, intruders, marines, medics, stared at one another in shared surprise. Then time shattered into frantic shards. The first blasts took down 2 security officers before they could swing their rifles. Amrita dove behind the monitoring console, hands over her head as sparks cascaded. Karn's restraints snapped under the strain of his enraged heave. The polymer was rated for hard lunges from a wounded Dromek. It had never been tested against a determined, battle-sober warlord whose life was suddenly, clearly, under immediate assault. He tore free of the chest and armbands, ignored the needles ripping from his skin, and rolled off the bed onto his good legs. Pain lanced through him, but rage burned hotter. The Gravbloom hollowness inside him screamed at the abuse. He told it to wait its turn. One of the Thalrin soldiers swung his weapon toward him. Karn scooped his own bed up one-handed and hurled it like a battering ram. It smashed into the man, pinning him against the shattered doorway. "Doctor!" Merrick's voice crackled over the hidden comm embedded in the wall. "Report! Boarders in the medical wing," she shouted, coughing. "Thalrin strike team. They're going for her." Her eyes met Karn's for an instant. In that moment, she saw the calculus in his gaze. He could break out fully, rampage, perhaps reach an escape shuttle, or he could stay anchored here and die in a corner like an animal. She thought of the triage tag she'd pinned on patients over the years. Sometimes you had to mark someone as unsalvageable to save others, but no one, so far, had tried to stamp such a tag on her entire species at once. "Admiral," she said into her lapel mic, even as she reached for a fallen Marine's sidearm. "I am with the Dromek detainee. We're being targeted directly. They want him dead." "Understood," Merrick said, pure steel in his tone now. "Extraction is en route. Hold. Hold." As if that were easy. More Thalrin poured through the breach, trying to angle around their fallen comrades toward the inner cells. Karn ripped a torn bulkhead panel free and used it as cover, shoving it forward into the hallway in brutal, staggering steps. He did not know why he bothered. The humans had used him as a chess piece, a bargaining chip. They were prey, playing at neutrality. Then he saw Amrita stand up behind him, gun shaking in her hand, and she did not run. She took a step forward instead, planting herself by his flank, aiming over the edge of his improvised shield. Her voice whispered in his memory, "You are a patient. That is all that matters on my table." "Down!" she shouted, and squeezed the trigger. She was a terrible shot by Dromek standards, but the close quarters made up for that. A blast caught one Thalrin in the leg. He spun and fell. Another's weapon skidded away as a ricochet kissed his wrist. Karn shrugged the pain in his chest aside and bellowed a war cry that rattled the remaining wall panels. The Thalrin nearest him flinched just enough for him to grab the man and yank him through the breach, using him as a body shield. For a few insane minutes, the medical wing became a cramped battlefield. Beds overturned as barricades, surgical arms repurposed as clumsy melee weapons, medics dragging wounded behind biohazard doors that slammed shut like coffins. By the time the first wave of UTA Marines counterboarded, the air stank of ozone and cauterized plastic. Amrita's arms shook, but her mind had gone crystal clear. Move here, shout this, press that patch, shove that gurney in the way. Karn fought with a ferocity bred in vacuum and betrayal, but even he was slowing. Each breath whistled raggedly. Where Gravbloom had hollowed him, stress fractures spiderwebbed. The last Thalrin in the corridor saw the odds change and made a new evaluation. He lobbed a grenade the size of his fist toward the core of the wing and turned to run. Amrita saw the grenade bounce under a diagnostic console. She calculated distance, blast radius, shrapnel pattern. She would never reach it in time. But Karn, closer, did. He dove for it, hand closing around the sphere just as it primed. He curled around it, his own bulk a shield. The explosion was smothered, choked, shuddering through his body rather than the room. He roared, sound cutting off in a hacking cough. Smoke cleared. He uncurled slowly, armor shredded, inner membranes torn and leaking. His bioluminescent veins flickered like distant lightning. "You are ridiculous," he rasped at her. "You're welcome," she shot back, without thinking. The Marine squad that finally burst into the room found them both standing just barely amid wreckage. It was Merrick himself who coordinated the extraction, overriding a dozen protocols to route ISS Tsiolkovsky in close docking lines, snapping taut in emergency handshakes. "Get them aboard," he ordered, voice flat. "We cannot hold this facility if they committed a full strike group. Tsiolkovsky has jump capability, and a medical bay, I trust." Raphael, already at the controls of his ship, grinned humorlessly when he saw the mission packet update. "Of course," he muttered. Back to playing ambulance. They pulled Karn and Amrita through collapsing corridors, gravity flickering as power rerouted. At one junction, an airlock dogged halfway, threatening to jam permanently. Nia Suleiman appeared there, hair floating around her head, hands deep in a control panel. "Kick it when I say," she shouted through the open channel. "Now!" They kicked. The lock cleared its track by a hair's breadth, sealing with a reassuring clang. When at last the Tsiolkovsky tore away from the crippled facility, Aegis Spire burning behind it, Amrita collapsed onto a crash couch near the medbay, chest heaving. Karn lay on a reinforced stretcher opposite her, restraints reattached loosely now. His eyes were closed, but his breath rattled softly. "We are not done talking about your habit of absorbing explosions," she said, voice raw, his mouth twisted. "You do not know how irritating it is to feel fragile," he muttered. "I spent my life teaching others to fear my hull. Now it cracks." Her scanner showed grav bloom flaring in response to the trauma. If they did not act quickly, his entire framework would crumble like rotten scaffolding. "What now?" Raphael asked, bracing himself against a bulkhead as the ship shuddered around them. "Straight to Earth?" "No," Merrick said over the link. "If we bring that fight directly to the skies over the cradle, we hand the Thalrin and Orishi all the imagery they need to justify permanent oversight. Kalpana Ring, civilian hub, visible, harder to quietly erase. And Dr. Das needs a fully equipped lab if she's going to keep our guest alive." May Ocampo, in her tiny rented compartment on Kalpana, felt the ring shiver as its traffic control systems bent over backward to accommodate a heavily damaged, heavily armed UTA vessel docking under emergency flags. She grabbed her camera and recorder out of reflex. This was exactly the kind of disruption her instincts told her to chase. By the time she reached the observation deck, ISS Tsiolkovsky was settling into the primary emergency bay. She zoomed in, ignoring the press-restricted overlays trying to nudge her away. The image that resolved on her screen made her blink. She had seen that silhouette in half a dozen underworld paintings and warning posters. The Dromic's crest, the pattern of scarring on his left side, the arrangement of armor plates. That was Karn Veskul, or someone who looked so much like him that if it wasn't, the universe was playing a very strange joke. She watched as human medics swarmed him. Then, she saw the woman striding beside the stretcher, issuing sharp orders, her face set. May tapped into Kalpana's internal news, net, fingers flying. Within minutes, rumors and hastily scrubbed security footage were flowing together into a wave. A Thalrin Orishi joint fleet surrounding Kalpana, for the sake of investigating illegal harboring of a war criminal, would have looked one way. A Thalrin Orishi joint fleet surrounding Kalpana, after everyone in half the Hab sectors had just seen that same war criminal dragged in under heavy guard from a ship ravaged by what was clearly an assassination attempt by Thalrin. Command, looked very different. In Aegis Spire's war room, Merrick watched the encroaching icons of the joint fleet draw closer around Earth and its orbital assets. "They'll call it a stabilization mission," one of his aides said bitterly. "We're just lucky they botched the murder first. Gives us something to wave when we shout." "Shouting is not going to be enough," Hector Gavris said. "We need leverage, something they cannot just plow over with the word piracy." Merrick's gaze slid once more to the penance protocol. This time, he opened it. The legal text was short, its implications long. "To all vessels and crews currently engaged in unregulated privateering or piracy operations within 10 light-years of Sol," it began, formal and simple. "The United Terran Assembly offers a pathway to conditional amnesty under the following framework." He forwarded it through a secure channel only he and Karn had ever used, one that had once carried a stand-down order and a grudged acknowledgement of debt. At Cinderport, where hollowed-out asteroids spun in a slow, menacing dance and ships docked 3 deep around scant airlocks, Saren Talak sat in a shadowed booth and felt her comm unit buzz. She tapped it, expecting another routine argument over salvage rights. Instead, Eric Thendar's face, the Thalran Admiral who had placed a bounty on her head after a particularly embarrassing engagement, did not appear. Instead, a human's face resolved. Older, sharp-eyed, in a uniform she had only seen from afar. "Marek Wojcik," she bared her teeth. "You are a bold prey, connecting to this channel." "Someone has to be," he said dryly. "I am told you are Karn's most loyal surviving first mate." Her lip curled. "Surviving? Yes. Where is my king?" "In my medbay," Merrick answered. "Again, being kept alive by the same surgeon who saved him last time. Unfortunately, certain parties have decided his continued existence is inconvenient." He outlined, in clipped phrases, what had transpired. Saren's eyes went flat as obsidian. "You fought for him," she said at last. "Again." "He fought for my doctor," Merrick countered. "You could view it that way, too." He sent the penance protocol. As Saren read, Bruskoval entered, wiping oil from his hands. The big engineer's eyes narrowed at the human face on the screen. "What trick is this?" he rumbled. "The kind of trick where we bet that a debt means something to you," Merrick replied. "Not money. The one your king acknowledged when he ordered you to leave our worlds unplundered. You have benefited from that truce. Our convoys are easier pickings elsewhere. Our docks, safer repairs. You have also benefited from Dr. Dass's work. I know you have smuggled her Gravloom protocols out here." Brusk bristled, then subsided. It was pointless to deny what everyone at Cinderport knew, that some of their crew still breathed because of treatments whispered along channels that should never have carried medical files. "What are you asking?" Saren said. "We are about to be encircled," Merrick said plainly, "under the banner of crusading against piracy. If we accept their protection, your quiet arrangement ends anyway. They will claim the right to inspect our cargo, our docks, our patience. If we resist alone, we will be ground between their fleets. But if a third force appears behind them, one they have spent years underestimating, because it does not wear proper uniforms, that changes the calculus." "You want us to fight for you," Saren translated. "I want you to fight beside us," Merrick corrected, "under our coordination, in this theater. In exchange, we offer formal sanctuary and a legally binding promise. Any Bloodwake ship that swears to defend civilian traffic in designated zones and refrain from predation there will have its past transgressions put under suspension. They will not be hunted by our Navy. They will be invited to dock, to receive medical care, to trade under watchful eyes." Brusk muttered. "He wants us to put down our teeth." Merrick shook his head. "Oh no, I am counting on your teeth. I just want them pointed away from my people." Saren's crest twitched. "Why should we trust you?" she asked. "Humans are new to the stars. You have no legacy of keeping your word in such matters." "True," Merrick said. "We only have one such legacy so far. What you are talking to now owes his life to one woman's refusal to break her oath. Your king has based years of policy on that one stubborn act. I am asking, if you can do the same." Silence spilled between them. Then Saren smiled, a hard curve that never reached her eyes. "You speak like a raider, Admiral," she said, "making big wagers on slim odds." "It's the only kind I enjoy," he replied. She cut the line and turned to the rough circle of captains and elders waiting in the half-lit chamber. "You heard," she said. One grizzled captain snarled immediately. "This is folly. We raid the Arishi backlines while they are busy. Nothing more. Risking our necks for that blue ball of soft things accomplishes what?" "It keeps our sanctuary open," Saren said. "Where do you take your cracked hulls now, when Arishi and Thalran ports close in their territory? Where do your sick go, when Gravbloom takes their legs?" She jabbed a talon at Brusk. "Whose protocols do you use then?" he grunted. "The humans," he admitted. "They work better than anything we had." "We owe that human," Saren said softly. "Karn owed her with his life. We owe her with our ships." Another captain spat on the deck. "We owe no prey anything. We take what we need. That is the way." Saren's eyes hardened. "Once, perhaps. Now the prey patched our king twice. They risk their tiny lives, while bigger empires use us as hammers. How much longer before there are no ports left that will touch us? No doctors left who will gamble on our rotten insides." She spread her arms to encompass the crowded, creaking docks of Cinderport. "You think we can take on both Thalran and Arishi alone when they decide we are inconvenient?" A murmur. She stepped into the center of the ring. "Here is my offer," she said. "We answer the call. We go. Those who come under human protocol will follow their rules in that zone. No raids, no casual slaughter, defense only. Those who do not wish to are free to stay here and wait to see whether there will be anything left of Earth for them to plunder after the empires are done with it." One particularly notorious captain, plates etched with 100 narrow scars, growled. "You speak as if you have the right to command me, Talak." She regarded him. "I speak as first mate to Karn Veskel, holder of the crown, guardian of his oaths." "He is not here." The captain's fangs flashed. "Challenge me, if you think you carry his shadow." The chamber's air chilled. Dromic customs were clear. Saren stepped closer until their foreheads almost touched. "Very well," she said. "Ship duel. My ember tide against your axe barge. Right here, right now. Winner decides Bloodwake's course." Brusk muttered a curse. "This is where it all falls apart," he whispered to no one in particular. The duel was brief and vicious. Under Cinderport's baleful watch, Ember Tide and the rival vessel matched vectors, trading brutal, close-range shots that tore chunks from armor. Saren fought with calculated recklessness, baiting the larger ship closer, then executing a desperate tumble that brought her under its blind spot, long enough to gut its primary thrusters. The rival ship spun helplessly, venting plasma. Only then did Saren call off any further strikes, letting the disabled vessel drift in humiliation while escape pods belched like seeds from its flanks. "You can follow in glory," she told the watching fleets, "or stay in shame." Most followed. The Bloodwake Armada roared to life. Obsidian Crown, long hidden, slid from its dark berth like some ancient beast waking from hibernation. Smaller cruisers formed up around it, engine plumes flaring. They burned hard, eating distance with fuel-wasting disregard. Scattered rumors ahead of them told of a black tide coming, and for once, the rumors did not exaggerate. On Kalpana Ring, Amrita stood in a glass-walled ward, watching Karn's vitals dip and spike. She had thrown herself back into the work without pause, leveraging every advance the intervening years had provided. Outside her ward's soundproofed walls, the station's decks thrummed with tension. News crawlers announced that Thalran and Arishi ships were assuming protective positions around the ring and adjacent orbits, pending investigation of illegal detainment and harboring policies. May Ocampo moved like a ghost through the press, her camera capturing snippets of terrified conversations. "They can't just surround us, right? That would be occupation. I heard the Dromic ship defended Tsiolkovsky against its own. What if the pirates are the only ones actually on our side?" "There are no sides with pirates. They only have target and plunder. In a hastily convened conference hall, Thalrin Admiral Arik Thendar and Orishe Commander Vos Kor appeared via holo, their images towering over the human delegations. "We appreciate your cooperation in this delicate matter," Eric intoned. "The presence of a high-level dramic criminal in your custody, likely without proper coordinating warrants, raises significant concerns, particularly since his fleet has been conspicuously absent from your immediate routes," Vos Kor added, eyes narrow. "One might infer a quid pro quo arrangement, which would be most unfortunate." Hector Gavris stood, spine straight. "We took custody of a wounded combatant and provided medical aid," he said. "We have not released him to resume hostilities. If you have questions about our internal legal frameworks, we will be glad to share them. But surrounding our stations with warships under the guise of concern is a disproportionate response." Arik's expression did not change. "Surely you understand that we must ensure no power, no matter how new to the stars, becomes a haven for piracy." From the medbay, Amrita tapped into the channel. "This haven for piracy is currently treating wounded from your skirmishes," she said, her voice filling the hall, "some of whom wear your uniforms." Feed from her ward appeared on a secondary display dozens of beds, some occupied by Thalrin and Orishi soldiers injured in the same boarding action that had nearly killed Karn. Human nurses moved among them with equal urgency to those tending Dramic and UTA personnel. "We did not ask their allegiance when we stopped their bleeding," Amrita continued. "We will not ask yours if your soldiers come in on stretchers. That is how we do medicine. That is how we intend to continue doing medicine. You are free to disagree. You are not free to shoot through our walls while we hold lives in our hands." May recorded every second, broadcasting to whatever channels would carry it. Far beyond, the Bloodwake Armada approached the system's outer boundary. Merrick's aides stared at their screens as dozens of red icons lit up. "Unidentified vessels," one whispered. "No, wait. Transponder patterns match the ones from the old pirate threat assessments. That's Bloodwake," Merrick finished. He stood a little straighter. Alarms rippled through the Thalrin Orishi formation as they too registered the incoming fleet behind their lines. "This may be our only chance," Merrick said. "Connect them." Naya Suleiman, sweating over a tangle of data lines in Concord Beacon's comms hub, muttered under her breath as she forced incompatible systems to talk to each other. Human protocols, Dramic encryption habits, the stiff formal handshakes of Thalrin fleets all had to be hammered into some semblance of mutual comprehension. Finally, with a judder, a wide-band channel sprang open. The voice that rolled through it was deep, crackling, and carried the weight of someone who had made himself obeyed in vacuum for a long time. "This is Karn Veskul of the Bloodwake Armada," he said. On Kalpana Ring, Amrita looked up in surprise. Few knew he had returned to full consciousness again, or that she had rigged a secure comlink from his bed at his quiet request as soon as he could speak without coughing blood. In the Thalrin flagship's command deck, Admiral Eric's fingers tightened on his chair. "In the name of reason," he said coldly, "how many times must we put you down?" "You have yet to manage once," Karn replied. His breath whistled a bit. Amrita could see from his monitors that even this exertion cost him. But his voice did not waver. "You attacked me under truce flag, in the heart of a healer's den. The prey sheltered me. You call me criminal. What does that make you?" Vos Kor cut in, scales along his jaw flaring. "You dare lecture us on honor, pirate?" "Yes," Karn said simply. "Because for all my crimes I have never shot through a surgeon to reach a patient, and because when I was helpless on their table, the humans did not slit my throat. They could have. It would have made their lives easier. They did not, because they hold to rules even when it hurts them." His gaze, somewhere far away but somehow everywhere at once, seemed to bore through the channels into every listening ear. "I do not understand such restraint," he continued. "It offends my instincts. But I respect it. More than I respect your pretty words about stability while your knives are still wet." He switched languages mid-sentence, rolling into a string of Dramic syllables. Saren, listening on Bloodwake channels near the edge of the system, translated for those who did not speak standard. "He says," she muttered, "in the old days, we would have laughed at such creatures and taken their ships. But now, We see their doctors bending our rot backward, their small fleets standing between giants who have only ever used us. That earns more weight than any contract I have signed with your kind. Back on the shared channel, Karn let out a slow breath. Hear this. The world they call Earth, the white-blue cradle, lies under my gaze now, not as territory, not as a prize, but as the home of the one who reached into my chest and pulled me back when all logic said let me die. Dramic law speaks of life debts, a life for a life. But one life can be repaid only with many when the scales are so uneven. He straightened painfully on his bed, ignoring Amrita's frantic hand motions, begging him not to strain. Therefore, Bloodwake declares, no hostile vessel will pass into the space around that world while we have engines to burn and guns to fire. We demand no payment. We sign no treaty. We do this because we owe. That is all. The joint Thalrin-Orishe command net exploded with arguments. Arik and Voskor exchanged a look that said more than their politeness on the open channel. If we back down now, Voss hissed on a private band, we look weak before the entire sector. If we push forward, Eric replied, we risk being the idiots who turned a quiet, malleable frontier into the rallying point for every disaffected pirate in 10 sectors. Out loud, he said, Karn, stand down, turn your fleet away. This matter does not concern you. If the humans want independence, they can negotiate it properly. Do not insult me, Karn said, a spark of his old fury flaring. You brought armed murderers into their hospitals. You surrounded their homes with your guns. That is not negotiation. That is siege. And Draumek know what to do with sieges. On the human side, Merrick shared a brief, weighted glance with his ops officers. This is the line, he said. We either hold here, or we accept that no decision we make as a species will ever be solely ours again. He keyed the shared tactical board, and, in a move no admiral in history had tried before, granted limited, supervised access to a dozen Bloodwake captains. Symbolically, it was like handing a stranger your house keys. Captain Saren Talok, he said, on a narrowband ping. This is Merrick Wojcik. Welcome to my war room. Her laugh crackled over the link. Not much of a room, but a fine mess you have prepared. We aim to impress, he said. On my mark, we pivot our inner line and feign a retreat. When they pursue, you cut in from the rear, right here, here, and here. He tagged 3 zones on the 3-dimensional map. You are trusting us not to shoot your engines instead, she said. Yes, he answered. Make me regret that, and we are both dead either way. In the inner halls of Kalpana, civilians huddled by viewports, watching streaks of light carve the darkness as ships maneuvered. May Ocampo kept broadcasting, interspersing expert commentary with raw astonishment. We are seeing something unprecedented, she said quietly into her mic. Human warships, Thalrin heavy cruisers, Orishi carriers, and now yes, that's confirmed Dromic pirate hulls, all in the same battle space. And the pirates appear to be aligning with Earth. The first volleys of the full engagement flashed to life near Concord Beacon. Aegis spires spat glittering lances of energy. Thalrin shields flared under impact. Orishe flak tore into the outer edges of the Bloodwake vanguard, sending one unfortunate raider tumbling in a spray of molten hull. In Tsiolkovsky's medbay, Amrita watched the war through a side monitor, while her hands continued their smaller, quieter war inside Karn's chest. Every vibration of the ship translated into a tremor in his fragile, re-repaired frame. Don't die on me now, she murmured. I have not come this far to let a stray shockwave undo my sutures. I would apologize, he grated softly. But this was your idea too. She found a laugh somewhere. I didn't ask you to declare a blood oath over my planet. Too late, he said. You bought it. Cheap. Outside, the dance Marek and Saren had planned unfolded. On cue, human ships at the front appeared to falter, pulling back under the pressure of Thalrin artillery. The joint fleet surged forward, eager to press the advantage and break through before Bloodwake could fully engage. That eagerness was precisely what Marek had banked on. At his signal, 3 Bloodwake battle groups, running dark on minimal emissions, lit their engines in unison and slashed into the sides and rear of the pursuing forces. Their attack patterns were erratic, almost suicidal, precisely what trained Thalran tacticians hated. They were used to disciplined opponents, not wildcards who happily risked collision at close range if it meant a better angle. Saren's Ember Tide streaked past the flank of a Thalran heavy, close enough that crew on both sides could see each other through viewports. She winked at them through her canopy as she dumped a spread of ordnance into their unshielded ventral arcs, then rolled away in a spray of debris. Brusque, aboard a retrofitted freighter now bristling with cannons, coordinated a swarm of smaller raiders, their pilots improvising wicked crossfires that funneled Thalran corvettes into the kill lanes of Aegis Spire's giant guns. Human crews, sweating in their cramped bridges, adapted on the fly to Bloodwake's anarchic style. "You see that spin pattern?" one shouted over an open channel. "They're baiting them into chasing curves. We can pinch them there." Nia rerouted power between weapon banks and shield emitters faster than anyone had thought physically possible, patching in repurposed mining drones as decoys that threw off enemy targeting systems. On the Thalran flagship, Arik's composure finally cracked. "Pull back the vanguard," he snapped. "Reform the line. They're trying to isolate us in segments." "We're caught between Bloodwake and human beams," his tactical officer exclaimed. "If we withdraw from the inner arc, Aegis will do it," Eric barked. But the delay had already cost them. 2 of their cruisers drifted, gutted. An Arishi carrier burned slowly, venting atmosphere and lifeboats. May fed real-time imagery to every channel that would take it. Pirate hulls interposing themselves between incoming enemy fire and damaged human ships. Draumic boarding parties, for once, fighting not to take, but to drive invaders off crippled freighters that had drifted into the maelstrom. The narrative of humanity, dangerous novice needing strict supervision, began to fray. As the joint fleet's losses mounted, pressure built on their home governments. What had been sold as a swift, surgical intervention to tidy up a messy frontier was now visibly morphing into a drawn-out, 3-sided war of ego, honor, and unexpected alliances. In the end, it was not morality that forced their hand. It was arithmetic. Eric and Voskor received near-simultaneous bursts from their respective high councils. "This was intended as a demonstration, not a quagmire," the Thalran directive read. "The human reaction has been more inventive than anticipated. The pirate factor introduces unacceptable long-tail instability. Disengage before domestic factions start using this against you." Voskor's orders were blunter. "Withdraw. We can no longer justify the expense in ships and reputation. Blame pirates if needed." The joint withdrawal was sullen, controlled, and laced with threats about re-evaluation of relations. But it was a withdrawal. Merrick held fire the moment their vectors changed, even when some of his more hot-blooded sub-commanders begged to press the advantage. "We are not here to humiliate them," he said. "We are here to survive. And send a message," Hector Gavris added softly. "Yes." Merrick agreed. That, too. The message had already been sent, not in grand speeches, but in images. Human ships fighting side by side with Draumic corsairs. Human doctors tending all comers. Pirates defending convoys for nothing but a sense of debt. In the medbay, as the last of the warning lights dimmed and the battle space quieted, Karn's vitals wavered, then steadied. The flare in his Gravbloom markers dimmed, as if even the disease itself had paused to catch its breath. Amrita sagged into a chair, head in her hands for a moment before professional habit straightened her spine. "You're still here," she said, more to herself than to him. His eyes opened a slit. "Until I am not," he said. "You have made that line very stubborn." "You helped," she replied dryly. "Shouting at 3 navies from a sickbed isn't exactly standard post-operative care." He chuckled, then winced. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "Saving me? Twice now. You could have let my enemy's knives do your work for you." She thought of the battle she had just glimpsed, of pirate ships arranged like a jagged ring around Earth, of the look on Merrick's face when Bloodwake icons had first lit his displays. "No," she said. "I regret that the universe is such that we had to rely on a pirate king to keep older empires honest. But I don't regret pulling you off that floor." His eyes closed again. "Good," he murmured. "Neither do I." In the weeks that followed, the United Terran Assembly ratified the Penance Protocol in a flurry of quiet midnight sessions. Bloodwake ships that had fought in Earth's defense were granted conditional amnesty. Their names went on lists. Their access codes unlocked designated docking berths under Aegis Spire and along Kalpana's outer ring. Pirate captains who had once swaggered into grimy asteroid bars now found themselves shuffling awkwardly through clean, brightly lit corridors, watched by nervous human security and curious children. "Why are their ships so spiky?" one child whispered to her mother as a Dromic crew filed past. "Do they get caught on things?" Brusque, overhearing, snorted a laugh and muttered, "Yes, like foolish Admiral's ambitions." Saren took an assignment she never would have imagined in younger years. Liaison officer aboard Concord Beacon, coordinating mixed patrols of human and Dromic vessels along new, carefully drawn safe corridors. She suffered through endless briefings on civilian engagement protocols and de-escalation techniques. She found, to her surprise, that not all were nonsense. Some translated well into the ruthlessly practical language of surviving with minimal unnecessary chaos. Merchant captains soon reported sightings of a strange new phenomenon. Hulking, infamous pirate cruisers matching pace with their freighters along known danger zones, weapons hot but pointed outward. When attackers probed the edges of those convoys, wondering if the rumors about Earth's new guardians were exaggerated, they tended to limp away, missing significant hull sections. No invoices arrived, no demands. Occasionally, a short burst transmission did. "Debt is not yet paid. Travel safe." On Kalpana Ring, May Ocampo stitched together her footage into a long-form story. She began not with the battle, but with a quiet recording of Amrita in the Lunara Trauma Annex years earlier, standing over the broken body of an enemy and insisting she be allowed to work. She cut between that and the white-blue ring of Dromic ships, now holding lazy orbits in the sky above Earth, their positions tracked by civilian apps, with a mixture of awe and disbelief. She showed Karn's speech, his rough admission of baffled respect. She lingered on Marek, staring at that improbable protective ring from the Aegis Spire's observation blister, his reflection superimposed on stars and alien hulls. "You know they're going to name this era after something grand," May said to him in an off-the-record moment she later debated, including, "The First Stand, the Dawn of Autonomy." "Something like that," he snorted softly. "They do that," he said. "But if they're honest, they'll admit it all hinged on a few very messy, very human decisions. A doctor refusing a convenient death, a pirate who took that seriously, a fleet commander willing to trust the untrustworthy." He paused, then added, "And a species stubborn enough to insist that its first real act on the galactic stage wouldn't be signing a contract, but drawing a line." May decided to include it. In a ward where the boundaries between species mattered less than the color of fresh blood, Amrita Das walked between beds. Human patients, Thalrin, Orishe, Draumek, others, caught on the edges of someone else's war, now gathered under her care. She stopped at one particular bed where a massive chest rose and fell slowly. Karn Veskel slept, his breathing no longer ragged. The Grav Bloom's advance had been blunted again, bought back by another round of careful, painstaking adjustments. He might have decades, with proper management, or only a few years. Either way, he had time he had never expected to see. Amrita checked his charts, adjusted a drip, and moved on. There were more patients to see, more impossible choices to make. Outside, high above the planet where her grandparents had once patched up people on far more primitive battlefields, the hulking, shadowed warships of the Bloodwake Armada held their stations in silence. No contract bound them. No paycheck compelled them. They were there because, long ago, in a cramped, overworked lunar emergency wing, one human had looked at a dying enemy and seen only a life that could still be saved. The rest of the galaxy would spend years arguing over what that meant. For now, Earth slept under the unlikeliest of guardians, and the stars around it were, for a time, just a little quieter.